What is up? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio, and we are now ready to make and mount our electrical board inside the robot. Before we get started, let's give our special thanks to FIRST and the Argosy Foundation for making this all possible. All right, for this, we pretty much just need half-inch plywood. You can use, actually not plywood if you want. You can use anything that is a half-inch or less. If you have some extra polycarb, you could potentially make it out of that. If you really want to add a lot of weight to the bottom of your robot, you could make it out of a big aluminum plate, but that is much more expensive. And you do have to be careful because it is an electronics board, and aluminum is electrically conductive, wood is not. So wood is actually a really good choice here. I've got some half-inch plywood. I actually ended up with a pretty nice piece. Usually it's a little more warped than this. We're going to be following along with the it's the quick build electrical guide. So we'll link you to it, but there is this drawing that has kind of the layout for it. And if you're there looking for that stuff, there's actually a bunch of different layouts, right? Because you can make this robot, this chassis can be made in the long configuration, the wide configuration, or a square configuration. So we did the long configuration, so we need the long mounting board. There are also two types of electrical boards that you can do. One of them you can actually have sit on top of your frame here. That's a little bit worse though, because all of your electronics is sort of exposed to get hit. The battery is a little bit in the way too, so we don't have quite as much space. I think it might also interfere more with anything else you're trying to attach on top of your robot. So I believe option 2 is what it's called, is going to fit down inside of the chassis here and rest on our front and back channel supports. So we're going to have to cut a U cutout shape for the battery box, and that's why we wanted to assemble our battery mount and put it in first. All right, so based on this drawing, we're going to mark up our wood board and then cut it down to size. But first, I got to get rid of this robot so we have some space to work. All right, first thing we're going to do is we're just going to get the outside dimensions set. So we need an outside shape, a rectangle shape of 15 inches by 32 inches. So just check your board, whatever size board you got. I think mine is 2 feet by 4 feet. Yeah, so 2 feet is only 24 inches. So I'm going to have to do the 15 going across and then the 32 going the long way on it. And we can lay that out the same way we laid out everything on our plastic. Again, if you have the big T-square, you know, you could actually set this at the 15 here. And just trust that line. If you don't have the big T-square for that, then just like before, we'll get our tape measure out. We're going to make some marks at 15. Now, on wood, I prefer to use the pencil to mark because it's a little bit of a finer line. And I usually make a mark that's like a check. And the point of the check is right at the number that I'm looking for. So that helps me find exactly the right spot later. And we need a second one, of course, so that we can have 2 lines to make a straight line out of. So right about there. And then we need 32 going the other way. So we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to go out to 32 inches. And then one more somewhere close to the end of our 15 line here. And 32. Okay, then any straight edge you have, right, we can line up on those marks. There it is. And then just do a line that way. And then for our 32, same deal. And do our line that way. Looks good. My first line's a little, I can see it. It's a little dim, but it should work. All right, so to cut this out, this is too big for our bandsaw that we have here. So I think we'll make these cuts with a circular saw, which, you know, now any wood cutting tools are going to work perfectly for this. All right, so let's just double check. 15 by 32 before we cut. So yep, 15 And yep, that's 32. So let me get this clamped. I guess I'll do this cut first. I'm going to clamp this. Make sure the edge you're cutting is off the side of the table. And I'll throw a couple clamps on here. And we just got to follow the line. Okay, one side is done. Let's spin this. Where's that? Oh, there's the other line. Okay, so we'll clamp up again to make our next cut. This one's long enough I can get the other one on the other side of the table, which is probably better supported. And same thing. This time, if you do have an extra person, they can potentially help hold on to this piece so it doesn't drop or twist on you. All right, let me vacuum this up before I make a bigger mess, and then we'll mark out our U-shaped cutout. Okay, so for the U-shaped cutout, it looks like we're going to go 3.5 inches in from one side, 4 inches in from the other side, and then we're going to cut 6.5 inches deep. But that is marked the way that we usually tell you not to mark stuff, right? We have been measuring and marking everything from one side of our pieces up till now. This piece is drawn a little differently. It's giving us the two different things. So one of the problems is if you are not at 15, like if I look at my board, it's a little under 15 inches. If I follow these exactly, this 7.5 inch gap that we're supposed to have in the middle might be a little bit short. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that my gap ends up at 7.5 inches. So the first thing is, these squares are really great for this, right? I need 3.5 inches on one side. Well, I've got a little groove here for 3.5 inches, so I can just put my pencil in there and slide it along. And that should give me a nice line at 3.5. There we go. And then, if I measure to that line, so I am just about a 1/16 of an inch short of where I should be, right? So it should be 11.5 inches, so that 4.0 plus the 7.5. And my line is just about a 1/16 of an inch off of that. So instead of doing 4 inches from the other side, potentially, I could do 3 15/16, right? I can give that extra 16th back up that way. Now, if you are this close, you can probably just do 4 inches and it's going to work. But if you're off by more than that, you'll have to make that adjustment. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to make some marks with my speed square here at, we said, just under 4, right? So I have 1/8 inch marks here. I'm going to go halfway in between those two marks. And another one somewhere out here, just before 4, halfway in between the two marks for me. And then we'll line up on that. And get our line drawn. All right, that looks good. Then our depth is supposed to be 6.5 inches. So let's go ahead and mark 6.5 here and 6.5 over here. All right, and then we just need something to let us trace that line. So I'll use the biggest, most oversized ruler I have. Okay, and this is oversized. I think this whole thing is a little bit oversized, but the idea is as long as this cutout fits around your battery box or the battery mount that we put in, you're good. If it doesn't, then we'll just have to come in and sand or file or make another cut until it does. Okay, this one's a little tricky again. These cuts are easy. I could cut these in with the circular saw and stop when I get to the end. This back line, though, is a harder cut to make. Maybe we could just barely do this on our bandsaw and make those cuts. If you have a jigsaw, that probably works really well to do the cuts. If you're going to do this with a jigsaw, a lot of times you can drill a hole here in the corners, and then you can cut into that hole, and that hole will give you enough room to start cutting the other way. I don't have that tool with me, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my cuts in with the circular saw. I'm going to stop when I get to the end here, and then I'll go back and use that multi-tool that I used to make the back cut on the polycarb, I don't know how many videos ago, for our the shooter floor. So that should work for me. All right, so let's get this clamped up, and we'll make those cuts. Guess we'll go right here, so I can cut in. Table is here, so I'll stop before I hit the table. Throw a clamp on here, on either side. All right, and let's line this one up. Okay, I didn't make it all the way in because I hit my clamp, so let's adjust that. Looks like I'm going to need about that much more space. All right, so we'll try to pick that hole back up. Right, and I stopped right when I get to that line on this side. We'll do the same thing on the other side now. Okay. And then let me get my oscillating tool here, and we'll go to make this cut as straight across as we can make it. Okay, that looks pretty good. I definitely want to sand or file these inside edges here. I guess all of our cut edges, really. So this is a little bit of a coarser file. So I can take, there's a little bit left in the corner that didn't get cut. Yep, and if you have sandpaper or a sander, that's going to work as well. Probably will get a smoother edge if you do it that way. Kind of get the bottom here too. Just trying to make sure I don't have too many sharp bits sticking out. Yeah, okay, that looks good to me. All right, next step, I'm gonna clean this up. We're gonna bring the robot frame back and we'll see if this fits. Okay, so this is supposed to fit down inside here, but we've got a little bit of a problem, which is we can't put it in. And one thing you can check though is make sure that down here on the bottom, your U-shape clears that bottom plate. We don't care so much about the top one here, but that bottom one you should be able to fit around. Now this has to go underneath the motors, and there's just no way to put this plate in, or this electrical board in, without removing something. And that is the reason why we're doing this now, before we finished adding our wheels and finishing the drivetrains off, because we actually have to take off one of these two end plates. And I think the easier one to do is the one that doesn't have stuff attached to it, so we'll go ahead and take this side off. Which means you need your 3/8 wrench and 5/32 hex key. And we have the 2 bolts on the top that we'll go ahead and take out. Luckily, they're not too long. Let me get my little bin here so I don't lose any of the parts. Okay, and we got some on the back as well. All right, and in order to finish this up, there are bolts on the bottom too. So I'm gonna flip this up on its side here. And then we can get the bottom ones. Okay, so let's see. Let's put this back right side up. I've had good success doing this. If you have this kind of off the edge of the table, this one beam in the back, you got some room to grab and to pull it out. Sometimes they're tight. This one came off really easily. And then the wood piece is going to go in, and this wood piece is going to go underneath everything until you get to the end, when it's going to go up on top of the channel that's here. Okay, and we can just kind of center it however you like. Although I noticed when I put this in, I did it wrong. So remember on the back here, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is the side with 10. And this side is only 9, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is the side with 9. What that means is when we go to put our board in, we need the wider side to go on the wider side. So it's probably just visible, but let's see here. This side is my 3.5, and then this side over here is my just under 4, just about 4. So the 3 side needs to go on the 9 side. So that means 3 with the 9, the 4 with the 10. Let's slide it back in and see if that lines up better. And it's not like you could attach this the other way. It would not really, be the end of the world. But this is now centered. So if you just kind of try to space it around here, look for your gaps here and here, and you can just try to make them look about the same. Now, if you are going to be attaching stuff down in here and you really care about how much space you have, this whole board could be attached farther one way, farther the other way. You could cut that U bigger and move it. If you know you're not attaching anything else, but you want a bigger floor in here, it could get a little bit wider. I think eventually it hits the transmissions here. So in this area over here, if we tip this back up, if I can do it without, breaking everything, this part of the transmission, it'll hit. So you can't go any wider than that, but you could go up until you were very close to there if you wanted a little bit more width on your board. But this board is more than big enough to fit all of the electronics that we need for this robot. So once again, I'm going to pull that up onto that. What is that? That's now our back frame piece here. Then we're going to take the front frame piece and slide that back on. Okay, and I still have the marked holes, so I know exactly where it's going. If your holes aren't marked or wiped off, remember it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in on the top on both sides. And we're just going to bolt this back in. So we're going to reattach this top one, or this front piece here, our front frame section. And you might have to, push on it a little bit to get everything to line up. If you have to, if the screw is not going in, like this one, well, that one went in. If it's too tight, if it kind of sticks and it won't drop through, then you might have to just, screw it in all the way, and that also works. Okay, let's get the nuts started on all 4 of these. Last one. Okay, and just like the first time we put this piece on, we're going to not tighten them all the way down. Instead, we're going to get the bottom one started, just so that we're sure everything is going to fit. And I think I can tip this up now, and the wood really can't fall out on me anymore. So that's good news. Okay, let's get the bottom one started. Now, with the electrical board in here, it gets a lot harder to reach the nuts on the inside. So that is the added challenge now. And you might need a second person to help out with this. My one trick is if you can hold it. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm going to hold it against this piece of metal and then slide it until it's lined up with the hole. So then all I have to do is be able to get one finger in there, and I can kind of see when it's lined up, I should be able to start screwing it in by hand. And let's get the bottom one started. Let's use the same, let's try to use the same technique. There we go. Oops, I missed. Try again. There we go. Almost. Nope, this one is. This one's being stubborn. All right, there we go. Okay, and since we're on this side, let's just go ahead and tighten it down before we flip it back over. So, just like before, I'm going to give that extra little bit with the handled Allen wrench just to make sure it's very tight. Okay, let's tip it back up. And now we can do the top bolts. So we started these, but we didn't tighten them. Now we can go ahead and tighten them all the way. And the other two. Okay. That's good. Now, we have one more thing to do to finally get this electrical board attached all the way in place. And that is, we're going to drill some holes through and then bolt it in. So I grabbed a few different bolts. I think on the materials list, there was a 1-inch 1024 button head. So the head is a little bit different than what we've been using. We've been using bolts that look more like this, up here when we attach the shooter motors and stuff, and on the frame of the robot. But they make ones that are rounded heads as well. Just because I think this is on the list, this is the one that I'll use. We need a slightly different hex key size. But if you have this size as well, it's going to work. These are 1 inch long, but I think you could get by with slightly shorter. As long as it makes it all the way through the wood and you can get the nut attached, then it is long enough to work. Okay, so we need to just kind of line this up so it's centered and we're happy with it. And then I'm going to go ahead and try to clamp this in place so it doesn't move. Let's see, get some of those, get some of these. Okay, and if you want it to be really, really precise, you could measure kind of the gap on this side, which is 1 5/8, and then measure the gap on this side, which is, well, 1 5/8. Okay, I'm pretty much in the center. So you can always measure it and make it more precise that way if you need to. Let me get a second one of these tiny clamps on here, and then we'll tip it up. You can do this all while it's tipped up, but you probably will want one extra person to hold the board in place while clamping it. If I tipped it up without it being clamped, the board would slide over a little bit, and I would need an extra set of hands to be able to keep everything lined up. Now that we have the 2 clamps on, I think I can go ahead and tip this up again. Looks good. And ideally, we can get another clamp on this side, although not sure if I'll be able to drill or not with this clamp on here. But I think these are too big for me to put them facing the other direction. Yeah. So that's fine. We'll worry about moving these when we need to. Okay, and these holes are just for the number 10 bolts. So that's the 3/16 or number 7 drill bit, whichever you've been using. So let's grab a drill for that. And let's get our drill bit. And really, we want one hole somewhere in this area, one hole somewhere in this area, one hole somewhere in this area, and one hole somewhere in this area. But which specific hole you use doesn't matter. I probably wouldn't recommend using the hole that's the closest to the edge of the board. If you get too close to the edge of the wood could split or crack. So what I'm going to do is, I guess we'll start on this side, because I've got my smaller clamps here. And I'm going to do not the first hole, but I'll do the second hole in. That one looks good. So we're just going to drill through. And it's wood, so it should be nice and easy. And then I will take that 1-inch 1032 button head. And once again, we got to get the nut on the inside, which is sometimes easier said than done. I'm going to take this clamp off now because I think it's in my way, if I can. All right, and now let's see if we can reach in there. I think so. So because this one's a button head, it's a slightly different sized hex key. And you can see too, like, there's not that much of a benefit to using a button head bolt here. So again, if you just have the other kind, go for it, use those. Because I was hoping that I would already have this started so I could move my hand to show you what I was going to say next. All right, there we go. Because like this bolt is already sticking out farther. Like another 1032 socket head would stick out the same amount. This bolt here is also a little bit bigger, so this is probably the lowest point on our robot. So being shorter than the lowest point on our robot, I don't know that that helps us much, but it's not going to hurt. So let's go ahead and tighten this down now. And on this one, we can go ahead and tighten them all the way down as we go. And this will sort of take over as the clamp then once it's tight. All right. One down. Let's do the bottom one here. Let me readjust this clamp a little bit, and we'll see if we can, again, drill that second hole. That looks better. All right, so I'll do that second hole in on the wood. I guess it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th hole from this other bolt. Okay, and put another one through. If it's a little tight and it doesn't want to go in easily, you can hit it with a hammer. You can also drill out the hole a little bit more. Or you can just use the Allen wrench to screw it in farther and farther. All right, there we go. We got that one started. Tighten it down as well. Good, we can take this clamp off. Okay, and back to the other side here. I don't think I can drill with this clamp in the way. So I'm going to move the clamp. Now because this is wood, you can see it does push a little bit, but it's not really moving a ton. And drilling into the wood is very soft, so the drill bit's going to go through it easily. So we can probably drill this hole without putting another clamp back on this side. If it were metal on both sides, if it were metal and metal, we would definitely want the clamp because it would bend out, or it would not start drilling in. We would have to push too hard to get it to start drilling in. And we would want stuff to stay lined up nicely. In this case, we get some advantages. All right, let's go ahead and tighten this one down. All right. And then same thing up here. So second hole in from the edge of the wood. And if you try to kind of hold on to this to support it, make sure you're not behind the hole that you're drilling. And last bolt. Okay, let's flip it up. Let's see how it looks. Yep, and I think that looks good. You can feel it. The 1/2 inch, if you're using 1/2 inch wood, it's going to be strong enough, like even in the middle. I can get it to bend a little bit, but I mean, it's only going to be holding electric stuff, so I have to push pretty hard to get that to move. So just the 4 bolts in the corners is going to do fine if you're using this 1/2 inch plywood. If you're using a thinner material, maybe you just had that extra polycarb laying around and you use that instead, you may want to add, instead of bolts in the corners, maybe throw 1 more in the middle, or a couple more bolts on each end. That'll help keep it tight and secure. But we are good with our electrical board. So now we're ready to come back and finally finish out the drivetrain in the next video. But before we go, one more time, let's give a special thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making this all possible.